Computer technicians, what's the most bizarre thing that you have found on a customer's computer? Story 1. I do IT support for a school, and had a teacher call me one day as 17 of the laptops the students use all stopped working at the same time. The teacher claimed that we must have rolled out an update that had broken all the machines, so was irate that we fix what we did now. As she couldn't teach without team, only when I got a hold of the laptops, which did I learn the teacher had them all working outside on a rainy day, studying, weather, etc. Story 2. So much hentai. Hentai desktop, hentai videos, hentai games, hentai manga, hentai pictures. He brought it in because he thought he had a virus. I was polite and didn't really react or say anything when I first saw the desktop wallpaper. I still can't believe somebody can be so nonchalant about such a massive collection. Story 3. The absolute worst was when I was at my first job. I was around 16 and worked with an older 21-year-old girl who was teaching me a lot. One day a customer walks in with an old PC that looked heavy. I took it to the back of the store and went back to the customer to ask a few questions when we suddenly hear my coworker scream really loud. There was a cockroach, but it didn't look normal. Look up a Madagascar cockroach and, ugh, disgusting thing, but whatever, killed it and moved on with work. A few minutes later there was another one, but we couldn't figure out where they were coming from until we opened the PC, and we found it infested. There was this huge nest of them. Still have nightmares about it. Disgusting. Story 4. I got a good story for this one. Not something I found on a customer's computer, so much as the events surrounding the situation. Years ago, in my consulting days, a customer brought in 2 desktops. They were covered in dirt inside, outside, everywhere. It looked like someone had literally shoveled dirt into them. He was pretty blunt about what happened. He said his wife had been having pretty explicit chat sessions with some guy on the internet. In a rage, he took his and her computers out and buried them in the backyard. He then thought better about it and brought them into us in hopes of having them fixed. That was pretty much the last time we saw him. We cleaned both workstations up and actually managed to salvage them. They sat on the shelf for a good year and a half waiting for their owner to come pick them up, but he never came. We eventually disposed of them since they had been there for a long time and repeated attempts to contact the guy had failed. One day, probably about 2 years after the guy showed up and 6 months after we had scrapped his PCS, a couple deputies from the local sheriff's office showed up with a warrant to seize his equipment, which we no longer had possession of. They were surprisingly unconcerned when I told them we didn't have it. Turned out his wife had disappeared, and when the guy was questioned about it, he confessed to killing her. They found her buried in his backyard. Edit A. One of my top Reddit comments is about a woman's murder. Not sure if I should feel impressed or ashamed. Story 5. This was back in the late 90s, and the dude had a folder marked jerks, douchebags, and assholes. So I had some free time and investigated. He literally kept files on every piece of celebrity misconduct he unearthed. Thanks to him, I learned John Lennon beat his wife way ahead of everyone else. Story 6. User departing the firm. Recent manager in her late 20s asked to retrieve her personal images. She traveled a lot to tropical places and had an entire folder dedicated to candid photos of guys, junk, and swimsuits. Story 7. It was a weird chain of events, but I got involved in regaining access to a notebook PC that had belonged to the husband of the daughter of a friend of my boss who had recently committed suicide. The computer was his work PC, and the deceased person's boss or business partner was looking for something that had been stored on it, but they were vague about what they actually were looking for. The drive wasn't encrypted, so it was pretty trivial to blank out the password for administrator and enable the account so that I could log in. I reset the passwords for the rest of the accounts and went looking to see if the data was still there or if I might need to attempt some file recovery on the hard drive. What was kind of weird is that there were multiple local accounts on the PC, and none of them really looked like they had been used much. Normally, people have all over their desktop, bookmarks, etc. This PC just really didn't look like it had been used much at all, so I was suspecting that the account and user profile the deceased had actually been using had been deleted. What I did find was child in the pictures folder, not hidden at all. The thumbnails were set to X large, so there wasn't much mistaking what I was seeing. Even without opening individual files, I reported the find to the police and had to show an officer what I found. When I informed the MIL about the finding and police report, she seemed surprisingly unfazed, like she was expecting us to find the child. Afterwards, my coworkers and I came to the conclusion that the deceased killed himself because his child habits had been discovered or strongly suspected, and that MIL wanted this evidence discovered after he killed himself. Story 8. Worst thing I've found. Some species of worms. Tons of the most bizarre story, however, is this one. So there's this old lady that I sold an old laptop to so she can Skype her relatives. One day, she calls me saying that the screen is weird. Initially, I thought she broke the LCD or she changed her background by mistake, but no. She had an entirely different operating system installed instead of the Windows 7 that I installed on it. She was adamant that she hadn't done anything to it, and that's how she found it after turning it on, but I was too fascinated by what software she had in there, so I didn't mind. After some meddling around, I found she had booted an hobbyist operating system called Minuet OS. How? No clue. Story 9, one of my older customers had a saved bookmark for Dungeon. The laptop was always overly greasy. Went through a bottle of hand sanitizer every time I dealt it with him. Story 10, not really bizarre. More devastating, really. Older gentleman, maybe early 60s, brings in his computer, says he has a virus, and just wants to wipe it and start over. But he wants to keep his pictures. So he leaves the computer, and I start searching for pictures. I don't find pictures of family, or his kids, or vacations. I find lots and lots of gay. So I back it all up for him, and then wipe the computer, and put in a folder on the desktop labeled backup. I call him, and tell him his computer is ready. The next day, he comes in to pick up the computer with his wife. At this point, I'm a little nervous. I have no idea what their relationship is like. But on the desktop, there's a folder with thousands of gay pictures. I don't know what to expect out of this situation. Anyway, they go home, and a couple of hours later, I get a call from the wife. She very gently implies that we mixed up their backup with someone else's. I wasn't really sure what to say, but I slowly told her the truth of the situation. I felt so bad. I could hear her soul being crushed through the silence. I never saw them again. I have no idea what happened to them. I still wonder. I really hope she's okay now. Story 11, from a friend who was working in a computer shop a few years ago. Guy had an issue with his computer running slow. My friend looks through it. Discover there's a fair number of movies, I hesitate to call it, on the guy's machine. All the people driving nails into themselves, scrotums and breasts mostly. Small nails, big nails with various sizes of hammers. Some even nailing themselves or getting nailed to pieces of. He said it all seemed consensual though. But all the techs in the shop had a very WT-fastic afternoon. Story 12, mid-late 90s. I was the Apple tech for a small, local dial-up ISP. One of the local TV station weather guys was having major issues trying to get his dial-up to work, and I was having trouble diagnosing it over the phone, so I offered to get fixed for him if he brought in his machine. He left it at our shop for me to fix, and he picked it up the next day. So much, he wasn't even trying to hide it. He must have been using the station's multiple T1s to download it, because the files were massive for the time. I got his issue fixed, and he was happy. Only a select few of my other techs knew about it. He is now the major elder TV weatherman in our city. You keep rocking of Steel Bob 1, thousands of photographs of creepy dolls, like tens of thousands, and of different creepy dolls too, hundreds of tiny postage stamp size pictures of women's toes. Assuming female toes, they all had scarlet red toenail polish. All the pictures appeared to be consensual, as in they were posed, but obviously amateur. 3. Enough bookmarks to white supremacy and anti-Semitic sites to choke a Clydesdale for. Several hundred GB back, when disk space wasn't cheap at all of gay. It's bizarre only because the person that owned the PC was loudly, virulently anti-gay. Obviously later, I realized he was one of those self-hating types. He later did come out, but when I found the files, it was a serious WTF moment, especially since it was on a work PC. Story 13, I was installing our software on a customer's computer and had downloaded their logo from a website in order to add it to a report, and the default save location was pictures. On going to the folder to retrieve the image, I was presented with an array of pictures of a man's pierced genitalia. The things you do when you are drunk was the sentence I heard from behind me. Turns out the photos were of his own piercing, so I then had to spend the next 2 days working with a man whose penis ID just seen in photo form. Story 14, IT repair shop. Nice gay couple dropped off PC and needed it hooked back up at their home after completing repairs. Found of them using ribbon to tie their dongs together. We picked the most homophobic crew member to do the job of visiting the customer's house to do the install. The gay couple watched over his shoulder intensely the whole time. For the next few months, we would ask our coworker how the ribbons felt, to which he would turn bright red and tell us to off. Story 15, I once opened up an HP inkjet printer that wasn't working. Inside, I found all the tiny wires has been cut into tiny pieces a few long. It was as if someone has simply cut them with scissors into lots of small pieces. I also found insect remains and put 2 and 2 together. So, concluded some weird African insects. This was in Africa, has crawled in there and being attracted to the power in the wires had proceeded to cut them into pieces. Told client to throw out the printer. WTF. Story 16, malware, scans 700 hits. This is quite a few, but scanners will hit bits of malware and flag it as a separate thing, even if it is just a part of a larger thing. Generally, this is redeemable and carries a stern lecture to the customer about internet safety. Remove malware. Second malware scan to make sure we are good. 2,500 hits. Not looking good. Try to remove malware again. Computer flat out refuees to boot. I pulled the drive, put into a quarantine machine, and saved as much data as I could. Luckily, the documents folder was clean. This guy had LimeWire, BearShare, a couple other similar programs, and like 250 gigabytes of pirated media. This was in 2011 when LimeWire and others were basically a virus trading service. He'd go on a lecture. I was honestly scared I'd find some really up, but he just had no concept of the risk pirating carries. Story 17. I have a buddy who works IT. One of the best stories he has ever shared was about a person who didn't know there was an eject button for floppy disks and ended up pouring liquid butter into the disk drive so that he could lubricate it enough to rip it out with a pair of pliers. As the guy was explaining all this, my friend snatched the floppy from his hand and popped it into the drive. The guy immediately started freaking out since it took him like 2 hours to pry the out. My friend just hit the eject button and stood there holding the floppy disk right in front of his face as the guy looked back and forth between the disk and the computer like, "Are you serious?" Story 18. My first week on the job. My buddy is doing a data migration, and the customer's furry collection started flashing by as it was moving photos from one machine to the next. When the guy came in to get the machine, we realized that what we saw were his collection of self-shot photos. Story 19. I work for a school where each student is provided a laptop. We have a fairly diverse student population. So while one kid might drive a Mercedes to school, another might have missed the past week because the option was him and his siblings eat, or he pays for a new uniform. So one of the assistant principals doesn't give the kid escalating punishments every time the kid is seen out of uniform. Anyways, one kid brings a laptop to the desk that's running poorly. These laptops have a couple trouble spots, one of which is the RAM, having been replaced over summer by bored kids, has a tendency to be bad from time to time. I open up the bottom, when like a party favor from bedbugs come flying out, bedbugs everywhere. I reach for the nearest heavy object, which just so happens to be a screwdriver, and begin playing. But with the screwdriver, I think I get all of the ones that came out of the laptop, but there's still quite a few on the inside. I douse the thing in an unholy combination of Goo Be Gone and Windex, to the point where it's no longer a viable option for student use. All the while, the student is staring at me with this blank expression, like she fully expected this to happen. I calmly-ish drop it directly into an empty trash bag, empty the contents of the Windex, and tell her to come back at lunch for a new laptop. The head custodian stopped by, chuckled, and said, "Head, get the place cleaned up for me," handed me a spray bottle of rubbing alcohol, which I promptly emptied into the bag of X-Computer. He seemed impressed by my intent on killing anything alive inside that bag. I called my wife on the way home, and having meet outside with a trash bag, stripped to my boxers on the front porch, my wife threw everything into a hot wash load. Neighbors saw the whole thing. All I could muster was a sad wave. I think she understood. In the end, the laptop was just thrown away. It accidentally got mixed up with actual trash and pitched. Nothing of value was lost. The girl who brought the laptop up has a younger sister who every few weeks gets sent to the office due to being covered in bed bugs. I'm going to go take a shower now. A guy brought me a desktop tower and wanted to retrieve all the documents and pictures, but the machine was corrupted, so I did a forensic recovery of all the data. Took me 3 days, and when I started collating the files, I found out the guy owned a strip mall and was running a meth lab in the center store. All the pictures were of the strip mall, the meth lab, and him and friends, and the documents were formulas for making meth. When I talked to him next, he admitted he had just gotten out of prison and needed all his old stuff to start up again. Paid cash $300 though. Story 20. I have had plenty of really awkward situations and seen a bunch of weird stuff on people's computers, mostly all related. One, probably the weirdest thing I found in a client's computer was corn. This thing was full of corn. I don't know why or how, and I didn't question it. It's also not uncommon to find stuff like roaches, too. The next one wasn't me. It was a friend. He worked for GameStop back in their prime and was going to buy a broken GameCube off a customer. It's GameStop, so they probably gave him a couple cents for it. My friend brought the GameCube in back to see what was up. He started taking the thing apart and found someone had put a whole sandwich in the disc tray. They then repeatedly slammed the disc tray shut, smashing the sandwich farther in until it was part of the machine. 3. This one couple came in because of a virus, but this was way more than a virus. Someone was specifically targeting them. Their computer had so much malware we had to just wipe it. Their phones were constantly ringing, cell phones and landline. They were getting hundreds of texts and emails every couple minutes. Their bank accounts had gotten hacked, as well as other various online accounts. I felt really bad for this couple, and I don't want to mess with whoever they pissed off. Also, elderly people they watch a lot of. Edit some honorable mentions were the laptop full of cat. The guy that came in once a week for a month because of all the hardcore BDSM sites he was going to. The elderly couple, which I had to do a house call to set up their new computer, and that's when the wife found all the husbands, the computer that caught fire, and I'm sure there's some I'm forgetting. Story 21 worked at a computer lab support desk at a college. And one time, this student brought in a laptop and wanted the keyboard to be in Japanese. I opened it up, went, and changed the language settings in the control panel for him. He was surprised when the actual physical keys on the keyboard were not changed. He then asked me to change them because his friend had the same laptop with Japanese keys. I replied that his friend must have ordered his with Japanese keys. He proceeded to get furious with me that I wasn't smart enough or wouldn't admit that I wasn't up to date on the latest technology to change the physical keys on his keyboard. Story 22, nothing really bizarre, but I can tell you if you smoke in front of your PC, it will be absolutely disgusting inside. PCs are mini vacuum cleaners. They up all the cigarette smoke, and it just coats everything, so if you want your PC to last longer, smoke somewhere else. Now, the coolest thing that ever happened was I worked with a lady who was a very attractive lesbian. She asked me to fix her personal PC, had a virus, and said, quote, "There's more than likely pictures of me and my girlfriends, and you're welcome to look, consider it payment, best day at work ever." Story 23, well, some of you probably remember the airplane accident in Smolensk in 2010, where a lot of Polish politicians, including the president, died. I was told to make backups of all photos, so naturally I had to go through the whole drive. I found multiple photos of the president's limbless, burnt body. Totally uncensored. You find on the deep web. Pretty bizarre, but I didn't mention it obviously. Story 24, not a computer technician, was a garbage man. I grabbed a computer in a wealthy, white neighborhood, $1 million homes. The entire hard drive consisted of the operating system and hardcore. Pee on each other Asian, nastiest stuff I've ever seen. It went right back to the trash, huh? Story 25, dog urine was pretty ugly. The laptop was also chewed too. In this days, not sure if it's still available. Toshiba had something called System Guard, so we just pulled the HDD and replaced the entire system. Story 26, God. Alright, so my father would take home coworkers' laptops and PCs and troubleshoot problems for them running slowly, freezing, etc. I would come home from school, and our kitchen table would look like something for tech support gore. Small, dead animals and bugs like lizards, roaches, and centipedes are way more common than you think. But probably the weirdest thing we've found while blowing dust out of someone's full tower was around 750 and change in the case. The guy told my father he found out that his toddler was putting coins in the fan holes. I guess neither of us noticed the jingling in the case while picking it up. Story 27, in the company where I did my traineeship, we had to secure the whole HDDs of computers of workers who were leaving the company a couple of times while securing the corporate notebooks I found on them. In one case, it even was homemade by that soon-to-be ex-colleague. Didn't care that I was supposed to tell my boss. Never did that, and included the stuff on the backups. Story 28, TLDR, the comments. So much the strangest thing I ever found was I in a customer's computer. This was back in 2002-ish. His DVD drive didn't work, and he complained that there were screws rattling around in it. I opened it up and found the P4 lead wasn't connected, drive issue solved, and the screws were actually a half-eaten 1-pound bag of peanut M&Ms poorly tied off with a rubber band. Someone on the HP assembly line had a major case of it's apparently. Story 29, had a fun history of working at mom-and-pop shops, then on a Circuit City before moving on to business computer support. First job was a Best Buy that I just opened. I remember working on one computer dropped off by an elderly couple who advised us not to worry about backing up any of it in the system. Was somewhat shocked at how forward they were about it. Same job, had one guy drop off a computer where the background was of his wife in a silk nightie. He and his wife were puttering around the store waiting in the repair. The tech bench was at the back, and you could see what we were working on. And so she decides to sneak peek and see how things are going. She sees the picture and quietly makes her way back over to the husband and stares, smacking him, nothing too harsh, but clearly showing displeasure at us seeing her like that. Moved on to a mom in pop shop who apped me under the table. Shitty place. This was back when Windows XP was coming out, and the owner had me putting Windows 98 SE on systems using keys from a photocopied list of keys. Wasn't proud of it, but I needed a job. Had one guy drop off a computer where when I popped the lid off, hundreds of little baby roaches started crawling around and making a run for it. In a panic, I start putting the lid back on it, but the owner just goes, oh, and smacks them with his hand. The owner makes me take it in, put in a black trash bag, spray the inside of the bag with insecticide, and place the bag outside in the heat to suffocate the bugs. Computer still worked when we were done, but gross. So many computers with roaches in that job. One guy dropped off a computer with on it. Was a friend of the owner's, so that went nowhere. Another job had someone buying recycled ink cartridges and came in with these full-on gay images complaining about the quality of the product compared to actual ink cartridges. While at Circuit City, we had one guy drop of an HP Media Center PC with a bay for an external hard drive to be slid in. I walked past it and my shirt snagged the door to the drive bay. Turns out the kid was hiding marijuana in there. My boss called the house to have them come and retrieve the computer. Kid's dad picked up whom my boss explained what we found, and we're advised that head pick it up. Kid comes by to pick it your first, but we sit on it while we wait for the dad. Kid thinks it off and goes about his business, then comes back in a bit of a panic and asks to see the computer. We decline, given instructions from the dad. Kid goes pale, really starts to panic. Dad shows up, asks us to show him. So we grab the computer and flip open the door while the just is next to him. Dad grabs the computer and stomps out of there upset with the kid in tow. Also, while at Circuit City, less computer related, and I've told this tape before in here, but we used to do VHS to DVD transfers. So this guy brings in a tape for us to transfer to DVD. So we the tape in the thing and start the transfer. We generally turn the TV off for privacy while it goes in and turn it on from time to time to check on progress. We turn the TV on and see it's some kind of medical procedure, the camera going through something like an esophagus. Everything wraps up and I start to play back the DVD to make sure it completed properly. I pull the tape out and see it is labeled elephant colonoscopy. A decade later, I still remember what I saw. Looked clean though. Story 30 IT guy for a finance company. Cleaned up a coworker's personal laptop from a virus. Found the pics of him and his girlfriend doing everything and anything. He hadn't mentioned anything about it when he gave it a B, but when I gave it back to him, he just kind of smirked and was like, "Were you able to save my data?" Dude was hung like a horse too. You never can tell about people. Story 31. So, I do IT for school. One day a classmate brought a computer and a fix. I began to work on it, and I just found loads of anime. Was certainly a strange convo with the kid telling him what was on his machine. Story 32. The most up was child. In a folder on the desktop, lab led child. We called them in to pick it up and had a sheriff waiting. Lots of people have on our desktop, but this takes the cake. Other things I found physically in computers range from cockroaches to oatmeal to a dead mouse. And people wonder why I drink vodka straight. Story 33. I'll add my story. Seems to be a pretty common one. My boss's computer got a virus, and he asked me to fix it because he knew I was good with computers. He gave me his work PC, and I checked it out. On his desktop was a folder labeled, which was about 500 gigabytes. Checking his browser history, it was full of sites. Pretty obvious how he got a virus. When I told him it was fixed, he thanked me and picked his computer up. It was just weird how he didn't seem to care that one of his employees must have seen his massive folder on his business computer, and he has a wife and 2 kids, but I guess since he was the owner, it didn't matter. After that point, whenever he was in his office, I couldn't stop myself thinking about what he must be doing in there, and it changed how I viewed him. Story 34. Used to manage a computer repair shop. Once found a folder on a customer's computer, right on the desktop, that contained child. I only saw one pic, but it destroyed me. I'd rather have taken a punch in the gut from Mike Tyson than see that pic. You could line up every heavyweight champ from the inception of boxing, and I'd happily take a shot from each rather than have seen that pic. I was so angry I immediately wiped the guy's hard drive, destroyed everything on it. Looking back, I should have called the police, but I was so overcome with emotion at the time, I wasn't thinking straight. Guy came back in later that day. Asked about his computer. I told him I wiped the hard drive. He started to get pissed, and I said, "I saw what was in that folder. You filthy, disgusting degenerate." I was so angry, I just wanted the guy to start something so I could beat the out of him. Guy turned pale, grabbed his computer, and left. Man, I wish I had called the cops. Not quite a job on someone's computer, but I did find a video along the lines of Snow White gets drilled by 7 dwarfs. I pretended I didn't see it. Story 35. I never looked at files on people's computers. One lady brought in her son's desktop to get fixed. Her son passed away, and I guess she was going to use it. I don't remember exactly. Either way, it had a naked woman for a desktop background. When I was able to get it to boot up, I changed it to a default background. I mean, there's a chance you want to see it exactly as he left it, but I think it was a good call to change it. One lady had a MacBook with a slideshow background. When I gave her computer back to her, it was on a picture of her young daughter naked and one of those like typical kids, not giving about being naked pictures. That was a funny moment how she reacted. There's also a few other pictures of her and a famous comedian that passed away in the last decade. I kind of mentioned that I saw some pictures scrolling through the background. I guess she knew what I was getting at. And she goes, "Oh, you mean my father?" And I said, "No, I meant the picture of..." Then it dawned on me, and I was like, "Wait, Bernie Mac is your father." I think I said something about how I thought he was awesome, and I was sorry for her loss. She was super nice, by the way. One of the best customers we had there. Now, I didn't see stuff on people's computers, but I used to see all kinds of stuff on smartphones I fixed. One dude had over 11K pictures, like 50 family pics, 50 him blowing loads on different chicks' faces. Most chicks had nudes. I think a coworker said he saw some up pics of some guy's kids on his phone. I can't remember exactly what he said. Story 36. Okay, so my ex-girlfriend gave me her old laptop because mine had broken. So I'm turning it on, and there was SpongeBob X Mrs. Puff. I had no words. I couldn't comprehend what the point of that was. Why would you possibly want something like that? Story 37. Fixing a laptop for a shy librarian-type lady. realized there was a disc in the tray, and clicked eject, and presented with the best of SM DVD, fixed her computer, and when she picked it up, I said, "You might want to check the disc tray." Unfazed, she was like, "Oh God, it wasn't it," and laughed. Never judge a book by its cover, lol. Story 38, I found a seahorse in a MacBook Pro. It was in for a water damage repair, and the customer said that some water had just spilled. Later, I told the customer, and they told me that a kid had spilled the seahorse tank, and they couldn't find the seahorse. Now, they know where it went. Unfortunately, it did not survive the trip inside the computer. Story 39, does meth residue count? Had a laptop that I opened up, and it was literally stained from all the meth that they had been smoking. Made me sick for about 3 days. Nasty. Story 40, I used to volunteer in a computer hardware store that built and repaired computers ECT. Anyway, there was a local female model who did the odd topless photo shoots ECT, and she brought her PC in as it was running slow. Her desktop background was a topless picture of her, and her folders on her desktop were all full of pictures of her photo shoots. And when you put a picture in a folder, they usually appear as a thumbnail or preview on the folder icon. So, yeah, it was a strange experience giving a PC back to a woman who knew 100 eBay. See her edit spelling. Story 41, spent a while working for a very large borough council in England in the IT department. One of the senior counselors there could not stay off dodgy websites. My boss got so sick of having to have us wipe the hard drive and reimage it every fortnight, or so due to being riddled with malware and God knows what, and completely unusable for work, as you couldn't then safely connect it to the network. She got him a second-only laptop for him to do whatever he wanted, on the strict understanding he didn't use it with the network connection in the office. Story 42, not a computer, but a phone. I worked at a wireless provider, and I had this one seemingly nice guy come in every other month stating that he let the neighbor kid use his phone. The browser was always locked up at those ads from sites that won't let you hit back, and he didn't know how to shut the browser app to clear it. I tried showing him how to close the app, but he kept showing up so I could clear his browser and keep his wife from knowing his secret. It was a weird unspoken deal because we both knew his story was bullshit. Story 43, exactly what you don't want to find. Kids, lots of them without clothes, instantly noped out of continuing the repair and called the cops. They sat in the back room, and I called him up to say it was fixed, arrested, and I gave him my report. He walked away with the cops repeating that he was a naturalist with his creepy high nasal voice and oversized purple suit and mustache. Story 44 had a home visit where the desktop was in an endless boot loop. When I arrived, the woman of the house explained her husband was using it and ran a Windows update, and when it was complete, he rebooted it, and now it was looping ever since. Rebooted with a WNPay flash drive and did a manual system restore and booted it into Windows with a wife sitting there. Computer comes to the desktop with a photo of wife splayed across the screen. Wife was mortified. Story 45 worked for a company who made POS systems retailers' restaurants sec. We found snakes, roaches, and one time a decapitated rat. Apparently it bit in a wire and electrocuted itself. The force of the jolt was powerful enough to literally made its head blew off. Body was in one corner of the motherboard, the head was at the other. And we found stink bugs too. Burger King and Arby's were the worst. Story 46, VP of our organization had a diaper fetish. Several pictures of him in diapers trying to act like a child. He looked like a live version of Mr. Clean. Great guy though. I did not say anything nor get him in trouble. Story 47. My friend was a good uncle and showed his nephews, or were like 4 and 6 at the time, that Dave Chappelle skit with the song, I Pee on You. The boys were fighting over whose turn it was to play on the computer next. One pushed the other way to get onto the computer, and the other peed on the winner while singing I Pee on You. I wasn't there for this. My friend relayed the story after I asked a few questions about the PC. That was the final time I ever offered to take a look at someone else's computer. Cow. One of our engineers had an automation project at some farm, brought the laptop in for a fan error, and it was literally filled with cow. Radiator in every nook and cranny around the keyboard. Story 48, I had a customer come in once, and their PC wouldn't turn on, so I popped the side off to see what might be wrong, and was immediately hit with the smell of very old cigarette smoke. Well, the inside of the PC was caked with an 18th inch 3mm layer of this yellowish-brown, goopy substance. They had candles near the computer, so the substance was a mixture of nicotine residue and wax.